How to manage your money. The majority of people who are poor, to be honest, could lift themselves out of poverty if they just bothered to spend a couple hours every year looking at their finances properly. Now, I know that's a bold statement, but I'll expand upon it further in this video. Most people, when they review their finances, they do it all wrong. Rich people tend to do it right, which is possibly why they're rich, or at least partly why they're rich. But poor people just can't do it properly at all. They get it all wrong. They'll typically just glance over their bank statements every once in a while, if they even do that. Now, while doing that is better than doing nothing, it doesn't give you anywhere near a clear enough picture as to what's going on with your finances. There's two very simple documents you need to create in order to manage your money properly, and that equates to about 2 to 3 hours every year that you need to spend in order to manage your money effectively. And those two critical documents are your annual budget and your annual balance sheet. Now, these may sound scary and daunting to anyone who's never done them before, but in actuality, these documents are really simple. Businesses cannot function without those two documents, and if you want to maximize your earnings, you should have the same mentality. So let's have a look at my balance sheet. This is my balance sheet from the end of the 23-24 tax year. I've censored some of it out. The bits that are censored out are private things that you don't need to know about. But the things that I'm okay with you knowing about and are already public knowledge, I've left for you to view here. But this is how you structure a balance sheet. I'm not going to go over how exactly to do it. There's all kinds of tutorials on YouTube on how to do it, but it's extremely straightforward. You have two columns here, assets and liabilities. And the idea of the balance sheet is to make sure you're balanced, to make sure that your liabilities aren't outweighing your assets. If you don't already know, an asset is something you own and a liability is something you owe. So if you own a car, that is an asset. And if you have to pay car insurance on that, or you have a loan for that car that you're still paying off, that is a liability. And what we do with the balance sheet is, as you can see here, we tot up all of our assets and liabilities, total them out, and then what we do to calculate our net worth, your net worth is how much money you would have if you sold literally everything you own. To calculate your net worth, all you do is you take your total asset value at the bottom there and minus it by the total number of liabilities you have, and that is your net worth. And if you make a balance sheet every year, preferably at the end of the tax year, then you will have an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet for every year of your finances. The next document we need to create is a budget. I think most people, if not everyone, knows what a budget is. It's how much money you're allocating to something across a certain period of time. This is how I've structured my budgets. So you've got 3 sections: money in, money out, and profit. And it's for this tax year, not the previous tax year, because the budget is how you manage what's projected to come in the near future rather than tracking what's gone in the past like you do with the balance sheet. Once again, I've censored out bits that I don't want you knowing about, but for the rest of it, you can see total income projected is about £26,000. Expenses, so everything going out for the next year, is about £10,000. And in total, that equates to a total profit for the entire year of 90%. Now, before we go any further, you may be wondering, how the fuck do I achieve a 90% profit margin? That just sounds obscene and unthinkable. Well, I'll show you how I've done it. I've done it by living with my parents on dirt cheap rent and bills, living in a poor part of the country, being single, not having any kids, and also just generally not spending my money on anything at all, really. I mean, if we go back to the balance sheet, you'll see I don't spend my money on anything. I've got almost no liabilities at all. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that this lifestyle isn't for everyone. It's just the lifestyle that works for me. And it's important to remember that money is a companion to your life and should never dictate your life. You know, your life is spiritual, You need to have spirituality in your life, and you need to understand what the spiritual purpose of your life is. You know, for the vast majority of people on planet Earth, their spiritual destiny is to start a family and have children. For me, I know that's not the case, but that's just because I'm special and weird. But yeah, for the vast majority of people, it's family and kids. And if you're starting a family and having children, you are not going to achieve a 90% profit margin, and you shouldn't want to achieve a 90% profit margin. You should be focused on giving your family and kids everything they need. But if you are someone extremely weird like me, and you meet all of these criteria here, it's definitely not impossible to achieve a 90 or even above 100% profit margin. It's all about what kind of life you're here on planet Earth to live, and from that, which expenses are justified and which expenses are not justified. If we go back to the budget here, you'll see I've also done something off to the right-hand side here of the tables where I've put the percentage of everything. And that's because you should be seeing your money, I think, as percentages instead of as values, as numbers. The value of money is constantly changing, and so to think of your money as a static number can tend to lead you into mental traps and affect your financial planning, where you tend to think your money is safer than it actually is because you're just looking at the raw value and you're not accounting for percentages. The main thing about thinking of money in terms of percentages is it stops you overspending, and also it gives you a very clear dynamic outlook on what your budget and expenditures actually are and what your income actually is, rather than it just being a static figure. So if we use an example, you can see I only spend 1% of my net worth on having a coffee every other day at the coffee shop. Now, there are hundreds of channels out there who will make clickbaity videos saying you should quit your latte drinking right now. It's burning this much money every year, and you're an idiot if you keep doing it. Well, if you look at my budget here, it is 1%. I have lost 1% of my potential net worth from having gone to the coffee shop every other day for the next year. Whereas if I just looked at the static figure of 700 quid, I might have saw that as more than what it actually is within my budget. And this is how you understand what you can afford and what you can't afford, is by using percentages instead of numbers. Because if you just look at the number, you might see a big number and think it's too scary, or you might see a small number and think it's not that bad. But by using percentages, you are putting that number against what your net worth actually is, how wealthy you actually are. And so that way you are able to dynamically see what you can and can't afford. So for example, you know, if my net worth was, say, £3,000, which for a lot of people in the north of England it typically is, people in the north of England are extremely poor. If my net worth was £3,000, then that coffee shop would move up from 1% of my net worth up to possibly like 25 to 30% of my net worth. And so the percentage really is a value of how much it's going to sting from buying whatever it is you are buying there. And naturally, obviously, the wealthier you get, the more you can buy without hurting your wallet too much. You know, this goes back to why I think so many people are poor. Obviously, on my Broken Britain series, we explored how people are poor just because the UK at the moment is completely fucked and industry in the north has evaporated. However, the other half of it is that is people's piss poor money management. I mean, a poor person might go splashing out at Primark every week because they like clothes, but they'll neglect to realise that they're spending, let's say, £1,000 a year on clothes shopping. And if they're on minimum wage with rent and bills, that could be up to 20% loss of their net worth every year. But they don't see it as that because they're just looking at the weekly spend and they're saying, oh, well, it's only... it's only 50 quid a week. I can afford 50 quid a week. But because it's a regular payment and you're doing it every week for the entire year, and you're not looking at what percentage that has eaten out of your net worth, you are totally ignorant to how much of a hole that has actually burnt in your wallet. You know, has it burnt a 1% hole in your wallet or a 30% hole in your wallet? Well, you would never know unless you did this kind of calculation here. Knowing what you can and can't afford also really helps out with credit cards and stops you overspending on credit cards. Now, credit cards are fantastic, and I'll explore them more in a future video. However, they are a death trap for stupid people and for people who can't manage their finances properly. A credit card company will accept pretty much anyone who hasn't completely debt maxed themselves into oblivion. So, you know, almost anyone can get accepted for a credit card, depending on what card it is, even if you have a net worth of like 500 quid, because the credit card companies make their profits off of people who don't know how much they can spend. So that's usually poor people. And because those people don't know how much they can spend, they tend to just max out the card and get into a permanent debt hole. Because they've looked at the £1,000 credit limit that the card is offering, for example, and they've wrongly thought that that's how much money they actually have, when they haven't done any financial planning or any of the documents you see here, and so they have no idea that they can't afford that £1,000 repayment. And so it really is just that simple. Just do these two documents here, the balance sheet and the budget. And if you're planning to be an investor, I've got my series Investing for Beginners that you can watch, and if you are becoming an investor, you will also need to do a portfolio, just so you can see what your investments are doing and how well or poorly they're performing. But other than that, this is it. You don't need to be really complicated about it. I made these documents all in the Apple Numbers app, which is Apple's version of Microsoft Excel. You can also do them in Excel or any other spreadsheet document maker of your choice. But it really is just that simple. Take out 2 to 3 hours every year to do this once a year, and you will be extremely surprised at how much better your finances will be afterwards.